Doshiteru Yokoso YouTube, and welcome to yet another Let's Talk Total War, the series where I take your replays based on a weekly topic, and we talk about the knowledge of the game that is Fall of the Samurai. Here we are. Today's episode is all about the use of cavalry. And I had many submissions. Thank you very much for everyone who did submit the videos. Do stay in tune till the end of this video so I can tell you about the next week's topic. And then hopefully you can submit more stuff. I'll leave a link to the information where you can leave the replays. But yeah, today we have a very interesting and probably a very key topic. Something that's very easy for players to really use wrong and not really utilize to their best ability. Today we're going to be talking about cavalry. This replay, the first one we're going to look at today, was submitted by a player called Pudi. And what we're going to see here is the first element of the sort of four categories, in my opinion, in what cav really is good for. And when you think about cavalry in any Total War game, really, be it Fall of the Samurai, Shogun, or even Rome Total War, cavalry allows you to do three very important things. First is the most obvious thing, which is the cav mobility. Cavalry can be here in 1 minute of the battlefield, and very quickly you can have them harassing or moving on the next flank. And this leads us to the second point, which is cavalry's ability to harass enemy positions. You could come in for a quick charge, pull back out. With your cavalry, fairly minimum losses. And when you think about cavalry as opposed to any other unit, it's hard to sort of, think of how and why cavalry is different. So let's breaking it up and putting it into these little small, sometimes maybe obvious chunks will help us really understand how we can use the cavalry effectively. So mobility, the cavalry's ability to harass, and the third very important point is being able to give you map control. With your cavalry, you can surround your opponent, you can force them to make certain tactical decisions, and you can pin your opponent's formation in certain places and free it up in others. And finally, of course, cavalry has the absolute best ability that they can do, or really the most obvious thing for people, is the cavalry's ability to just charge at a unit and devastate it. And we're going to look at all these here. Not just in this battle, we're going to look at many battles today. So the first thing we talked about is mobility, and how you can use your mobility of your cav, obviously, to sort of put little bits of pressure on your opponent in different places. And you can do this really in many ways. You could do this with a standard cavalry unit, sort of like the Yariki. A unit that has the spear that's good against other cavalry, or you could use a skirmish cav unit, sort of like a carbine cav, or maybe these revolver cav that are brought today by Pudi. So let's take a look at what Pudi has brought today. Over here on the right side, you can see he has an Imperial Guard cav. And now what Imperial Guard cav allow you to do is they've got excellent shooting. They're sort of like a better carbine cav, really. They've got better melee attack, better melee defense. Not very great at charging, but they can harass enemy positions excellently. So Pudi has brought 2 Yariki, an Imperial Guard cavalry, and then he's brought these revolver cav, which are like carbine cavalry again, but sitting on the lower end of the spectrum. He's got 2 of those, and finally 2 Yariki. So what he has brought today is a cav contingent that is big. A cav contingent that's going to be able to sort of overwhelm one flank at a time, or maybe he is going to attempt to split his cav up to sort of apply pressure in different areas of his opponent's army. His opponent today is Black Silver, and Black Silver has a lot of line infantry. You can see he's brought a lot of Black Bears. He does have some cavalry of his own, not many though. He's got this 1 Yariki. So you can see just from the minimap that already the forces of Black Silver are sort of starting to get a nice little surround on Pudi's forces. So what is Pudi going to do? And this is now the first showcase of really a good way to use cavalry. And let me just pause before this happens. This video, it's really sort of hard to narrow down a huge topic like cavalry down. It's hard for me to sort of talk about everything. So this video isn't going to aim to sort of show you every single possible way on the planet to use cavalry units, but I'm hoping to show you guys a good mixture, a good use of cavalry in different positions in different ways, so that hopefully you can see what I mean. So let's take a look here at Pudi. So he's lined up his troops, he's trying to skirmish the center of his opponent. He's actually doing rather well, just because his opponent isn't committing troops. And now look what he's going to do. He is going to split his cavalry up into two main parts, and now this is what the mobility of cav grants you. If your opponent doesn't have enough cav to counteract your units, Pudi is just doing this standard thing. He's going to bring his units over here to the side, and notice that he's not brought all of his cav, he's left some in the middle, and now he's bringing the rest here. And notice how this is very important. He's bringing his cav in using the terrain. These units over here, if he just charged or moved his units up here, or maybe down through the trees, they would have had vision on them, but he just smartly went around the building, and now the cav are basically hidden to these black bears. So obviously to both players the cav aren't hidden, but to these black bears they might as well be hidden. And now look at this. He's going to engage that. He's going to charge at this unit. Let's put this thing in slow motion. He's sending one unit around, and this is something you always want to do. You always want to sort of surround your enemy in terms of how your cav maneuvers, especially if there are other cav in the mix. And now look here in the middle. He is going to ride his cavalry right into the center of his opponent. So this is something that you can do, especially in builds like this. If your opponent has a lot of line infantry, intimidating line infantry, you can do what Pudi is doing right here. He's going to take the opportunity to just walk right into the center here. And yeah, sure, he's taking shots from the right and from the left, but now look at this. His cav has pretty much cleaned up one flank completely, and they have also cleaned up the other flank. Now in this particular situation, Black Silver went for an army that heavily favors map control. An army that maybe isn't going to do too well on a map like this here. But you can see the use of cav by Pudi. What he did is, he just simply committed his troops on one side, and then attacked from another location. Two-pronged attacks, which is something that a lot of people don't tend to do. You know, I play online and I see replays, and I see people liking to sort of mass all their cav on one side and try to sort of overwhelm one flank at a time, and Pudi just showed us that you can do something else. What remains here is these sort of elite troops, I would say. A Shogunate infantry, and then some black bears. And you can see this Yariki now coming in here and hitting this one unit of Yariki. They're not going to do well, obviously, but at this stage of the battle, Pudi is actually going to start doing another thing here. He's going to start using his Imperial Guard cavalry to sort of skirmish with his opponent. So the aim of that replay by Pudi was to sort of show you how is one way sort of moving into your opponent, using the mobility of your cavalry, and then moving around them sort of, and then committing from both sides and sort of winning. He just won the central fight and won the flank fight, and now he's in a great position to sort of clean up these units, which he does. So that's the first replay submitted to me by Pudi. Thank you very much, Pudi. And let's go ahead and look at the next one here I have on my list. There we go. This replay was submitted by Kid Taylor, and he's playing against Sainsur from the UFTW clan on the Yamasaki Choke Point. Now, Yamasaki Choke Point is a map that really favors cav, in my opinion, because these sort of strips that you see here, usually an army will either line up on one side of the strip, maybe split their troops up to go sort of in the middle, and then on one side of the strip. But in any case, cavalry always finds gaps, and there are a lot of trees surrounding the rivers, here and here, as well as here. So it's really easy for cav to move around and sort of do their job, really. So let's take a look at what Kid Taylor has here today. He has brought a very, very strong cav contingent. And this is, you know, sort of like an ideology of play. Do I want to bring a strong main contingent, or do I want to bring a strong cav contingent? And today, in this battle at least, we're going to show the shock power of morale and surrounding that cav can do. In the last battle, we saw the ability of cav to sort of strike at different locations, shatter your opponent's line, and in this fight, we're going to take a look at different tactics. A Shogunate Guard Cavalry, pretty much the top-notch, one of the top-notch at least, cav units. You could kind of think of them as the Great Guards of Fall of the Samurai, but not really. They're not as potent as the Great Guards were. This unit here is a Yariki, and you can see this Yariki with some attack upgrades actually sits at the same attack, but doesn't have the same charge as this Shogunate Cavalry, which really excels at charging. So here we go. 2 Yariki, 1 Shogunate Guard Cavalry. There is another cav unit, which is his Imperial Guards. He's got his General, and then over there on the left, he has 3 more cav units, and let's pause here. He's got a Yariki, and another Shogunate Guard Cavalry. So what did Kid Taylor do here? With his Bushido General ability, he was able to actually capture both of these dojos, and this was something that wasn't sort of available to us in the older Shogun games, where you sort of couldn't establish map control with cavalry, at least not in this sense. Now with the cav, you can move your units very quickly, capture a building without even dismounting, and get out of there. So without dismounting, you really don't have the risk of you know, getting charged maybe from the sides, or maybe getting engaged by a stronger foot unit. In Fall of the Samurai, you can just very much go in, take a building, and sort of force your opponent to go for another one. So here we go. Today, Kid Taylor is fighting Sinur, I think his name was, or Sinosaur, or something, I can't remember. But again, a lot of these Black Bear infantry, going for, again, maybe trying to establish some sort of map control, maybe just spamming one type and hoping that that's going to work out for him. Fall of the Samurai is very line battle oriented. He does have some cavalry of his own. Yariki, 3 Yariki in non-veterans. And we'll talk about how you should upgrade your cav a little bit later. But Kid Taylor's army is basically a rush army. What he's going to do is he's going to sort of pair up all his units here in one big group, and he's going to just run into this line from one point. He's only going to be taking fire from 2 units at a time, which is a good idea here. He's not going to be getting shot by many units. He's only going to take 2 units at a time. And here comes the cavalry of his opponent. They're going to rush right into this unit of Spear Levy. Not very smart. And now look at this. Right after the reload went on, Kid Taylor is just going to commit his forces forward. And you know, this is something that a lot of people I think tend to forget, is that sometimes your cavalry can simply just charge. You can see Kid Taylor here just charged right up the middle. His units took some casualties as they were trying to rush in there, but now he just simply sent all his cav forward. And what his cav are going to do is, well, they're going to engage their enemy cav. But most importantly, what he's doing here with this type of army is he's preventing these units here from shooting at his little blob. And you know, this is an interesting tactic. You see people doing this with traditional armies versus Fall of the Samurai army, but this is actually a Fall of the Samurai army using that extra attack that the Katana Kachi have. So he's held up these units long enough, and now he's gonna just throw his cav at this side, hold these guys up, and give his blob more time to sort of move in and deal with these units. So if you fast forward, you can slowly see a pattern. He uses his cav, weakens one side of the fight, moves his blob in, cleans it up, keeps moving the cav to another location on the battlefield, pins that side down, and then follows around with a blob. So what he's doing is simply charging his cavalry. It's just seeing an opening, and notice he picked the weakest side of his opponent, a side where only 2 units were able to shoot at a time, ran his spear levies forward, which are pretty much meat shields, and then he was simply able, even though his opponent had a lot of line infantry, he was able to move around, and you can see he worked his way around the flank, came on here, destroyed the main portion, used his cav, and you can see at the end of the battle, his cav is really non-existent anymore. And what kind of cav did he bring? Well, he brought a lot of Yariki, and he brought the Shogunate Guard Cavalry, which have a great charge. So this is a really nice tactic, I thought at least, from Kid Taylor. It shows you a different way, I guess, in playing Cav armies. But you can see here, towards the end, he is going to start losing steam. And the reason he's losing steam is because, well, he's lost a lot of Cav, he's lost a lot of his units in the fight, and his opponent did spam Black Bears. So, yeah, he might not have done particularly well. Let's see. I don't think he actually ends up winning the fight. No, he doesn't. But the tactic he used here was definitely something that you could use to your advantage, especially if your opponent had sort of more Cav, or maybe a little bit of a melee component. So we've seen cavalry now being used in two different ways. In the first battle by Pudi, we saw two-pronged attacks, attacking from the center and from the side, overwhelming your opponent with the mobility of your cavalry. And now, with Kid Taylor, we saw using Cav to sort of pave the way for your approaching a blob of troops, if you would like to call it that. Now, Kid Taylor did submit one more replay, and we're actually going to take a look at it right now in this part. Here we go. And it's on the Kurobe Gorge, and this is one of the new maps. This is a pretty good map for cavalry, but the problem with them is that if your opponent sort of decides to sit on a hill, tactically, your cav kind of becomes, I don't want to say useless, but it becomes a little bit more harder to sort of do the thing you're trying to do, especially with your cav. Artillery really likes this map just because you can put them nicely on a high ground and they almost get sight over all of the battlefield. So today Kid Tyler is playing against Jan 2 Ebner. Okay, Jan 2 Ebner, that's an interesting name to say the least. So we've seen the ability of Cav to obviously charge right in. We've seen the ability of Cav to a double-pronged attack. And here we go, the same build again from Kid Taylor. And again, you can see this map, a lot of forestry. Imagine like an Armstrong gun that's positioned here. Just look at this. It sees the entire battlefield, and it can devastate. But again, see, cavalry can be tough. Can be tough to use cavalry on a map like this, just because there are a lot of trees and hills. Line infantry could be positioned in a bad way. The same build from Kid Taylor, and now look at this. His opponent today has also brought a good number of cav. He's brought Yariki, the Imperial Guard Cavalry, another Yariki, and here another Yariki, and not too many experience chevrons on them, however. So here we go, just standard stuff. Kid Taylor is going to start by picking out units that your opponent has sort of positioned badly. And this is essentially the real only form of cav versus cav harassment that you can do. It's going to end up here becoming a fight, a cav fight. And now look, he's trying to sort of get his units away. And you remember you got to double click out of that several times to get your units away. But you can see Kid Taylor here, not going to get bogged down. He's going to let his superior Yariki handle these weaker ones. And then he's going to send a very strong Yariki to deal with this heavily expensive Imperial Guard Cavalry, which actually is going to be staying in the fight for a while. They don't have the same bonus versus Cav, however, against the Yariki. They have a 0 bonus against Cav. So you can see here, very nicely taking care of his opponent's Cav, and already he's starting to tip the whole equation to his favor. So, okay, take care of your opponent's Cav, and just notice how he didn't just sort of commit his troops. This was very calculated on his part, in that his units, he knew that his cavalry was going to win that fight. And this is something huge when you're playing cavalry. There are the good things and there are the bad things. Good, have a purpose, you know? Have an either defensive or offensive purpose to your cav at all times. Don't be too reactive. You always want to sort of have I'd say a game plan or a purpose for your cavalry when you bring them in to the field. And in this case, in Kid Taylor's case, well, what are his purposes? His purposes are to secure buildings with his cav, and obviously because he has so many high charge cav units, he wants to win the cav fight. He wants to be able to keep his cav so that his cav can then harass the opponent's lines at the weak spots, and then he could follow up with his melee blob, which is what we pretty much saw in the last fight. In the last fight, his opponent did an attempt to engage with the cavalry, which is, I'd say, a good thing by his opponent last battle, which actually may have allowed him to win. But here, Kid Taylor sort of took his opponent's cav out of the equation. So he had a purpose. You don't want to be a sitting duck, but you also want to be responsive. By being responsive, I mean, you know, being able to pull your cav out and use them in the sort of right manner. Like over there, you saw like how he engaged the cav, and then he saw that Imperial Guard cavalry sitting there. He simply pulled out and then attacked. You don't want to just commit all your cav to one unit at a time and then go look somewhere else in the battlefield. Or if you can look somewhere else but still command your cav to do well, obviously that's the best thing. But you can see here, if he didn't split his units up and attack that Imperial Guard cavalry, he wouldn't have this many cav units remaining. So let's see what he does now with his left flank. He's going to commit to this side of the fight. And again, I think these were some Shogutai hidden. You can see he's going to hit this side, hit the side of the army. They were lined up facing that way for some reason, and now he's just going to follow up with his units just like we saw last time. So the key thing about this cav usage here by Kid Taylor is they're a perfect complement to their army, to his army. They are, I mean, you don't see many melee armies like this anymore, but this kind of rush army is actually very, very deadly if used in this way. When Kid Taylor asserts cav domination, his opponent is almost always going to be doomed. He's gonna just overwhelm the sides. He used his cavalry very effectively, and now you can see he was using that Imperial Guard cavalry to sort of finish the job. So now, 3 battles in this part. We saw how cav's mobility can be used to double prong attack at your opponent by Pooty. And then we saw Kid Taylor in 2 replays. We saw him first use the cav's ability to open ways, to create openings for your army. He moves them in at one position, bogs down the opponent, and then uses his rush army to sort of follow up with his troops and make way. And then he rolls up the flank very nicely. And then in his second battle, you saw him use his cav, respond to his opponent's seeking sort of a cavalry engagement, and you can see he never really threw away his cav. There's always a purpose to moving your cav around. You don't want to just, oh look, I have a cav unit that's not doing anything, let me just click it here. That's not really going to do much. Your cavalry's power is in their mobility and their ability to charge and gain something. So that is going to be the end of part 1 of Let's Stack Cavalry. Be sure to check out part 2 coming very soon. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.